Barry, here we go. We live. Peace, peace, Barry.
Peace,
You live.
peace. Look at it. Well, we alive again.
Bam. Okay, go ahead. All right, family, we back up in here. This discussion, part 2. And
Yes.
we're looking at the black vote. What's in it for us?
What's in it for us? It's beautiful. Thank you all for tuning in. Had a great discussion yesterday. We had some millennials, and they brought it. So we have another group of power-packed individuals in our community that's going to bring it as well. We're going to definitely deep dive into this. Today is election day. Y'all excited about that?
Yes.
Election
Yes.
day. We know a lot of people have voted. Yeah, almost over.
Yeah.
For some of us who have been doing a lot of groundwork, I know every single person here at this table has been doing a lot of, just balloting, talk, a lot of canvassing, phone banking, and pushing the movement and in such a way towards making black people, if they didn't know, now they know your vote is important. So I just wanted to get everybody to kind of say who they are, and then let's get into it.
Okay. Well, my name is Cecile Nunley. I am running for Sacramento City School Board, Area 2.
Yes.
It is so critical. If I can, Barry, if that's okay, if I could just jump right into it. I want to talk about that whole thing with our kids, because part of the reason why I got in was because of the whole issue that is happening right now with our youth in the schools right now. In June 21st, a report put out that African American males are being suspended at 3 times the rate of their counterparts. And for K through 3, it's 10 times. We're talking young children that are not even in double digits yet, that are already suffering and being excluded from the education process. How can we get ahead if we're already excluded at 5, at 6, at 7, at 8? We need to make sure that our children are being served. The other thing that I looked at with the contestants, my opponents, nobody on that school board looks like me. None of the opponents look like me. None of them have that issue as part of their platform. So we need to make sure that we're being heard on that it's so critical when it comes to our schools, that we be involved, not only as parents, but that we be involved in the whole process. So I just wanted to take that minute. I hope that's okay.
Good. You said what you need to say. Now let's go down the line and just a real quick intro.
Great. I'm Les Simmons, for those that are watching, pastor, community leader, also director for the Simmons Center and part of Sacramento Act, as well as Build Black Coalition. And I'm just thankful for, you all leaning in, continually leaning in, Barry, and Voices of Youth, and Mama Ro, and Earth Mama Healing, and creating spaces to ground us, to equip us, and to empower us to have that kind of collective impact that we know is needed right now, today, November 6th. We got a few hours left, and I know we got some things coming up with some ice cream socials for those last minute kind of voters that are coming tonight. Trap the vote at the 7710 Stockton Boulevard. If you want to drop your ballot off after 5 o'clock, you get off work or something like that, Barry is gonna buy you some ice cream.
Listen, I got coerced into the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm
I was
using
supposed
his
to get the
dollar
food, but
today.
now he says he's gonna use it.
Yeah, so we'll create the space. Come bring your ballot, and we want to make sure and lift our voices right now. It's that time to really say this matters, and it matters because it's some things that are important to us that we'll hear about a little later in the discussion.
I have to follow that. Good morning or afternoon, brothers and sisters. My name is Omega Brewer. I am the Northern California Political Coordinator with SEIU Local 2015. We represent long-term care workers, so home care workers and nursing home workers in an industry that is 85% women, and of that, about 90% of women of color and individuals of color. And I love what I do every day because we get to uplift and empower women of color to take their own futures and to know that they have a voice and that they have the right to live with dignity and respect. And on election day, it's fitting that we are having this conversation because that is one of the big focuses of our local, is empowering our members and in their greater communities to vote.
And good morning. I'm Daryl Roberts, co-founder of Roberts Family Development Center. For me as longtime community advocate, probably start off more solutions to some of the challenges I see in our community. My partner Tina Roberts have been, for the last 20 years, working together on trying to solve problems within our community. Echoing what Sister Cecile Nunley said, that what's happening to our kids in the schools require all of us to take an interest, an active interest. Those of us who are older, who are no longer with kids in schools, need to go to schools to check out what's happening to the grandkids, friends, and the grandkids at the schools. Because not only are our boys being suspended, more and more our girls are being suspended.
Yep, that's
And I
true.
think it's important that we recognize that without our presence, things will not change. So Mama Ro Berry, want to thank you for this opportunity to have this discussion with these three leaders in our community as we talk about solutions.
What is the purpose of voting?
That like honestly,
Honestly, what is the purpose
what
of
is
voting? Help us out here.
if I'm a black kid and I'm seeing what I'm seeing, right, and I'm a black adult seeing what I'm seeing, they don't respect our culture. We are in every category, we are at the bottom, and that we should be lifted up into. In every category that they're at the top, but we cannot see ourselves being there. So when we look at the vote, it seems like we were fighting to get a vote, that we were uneducated on how to vote. Why would I think that now I'm going to place my ballot, this thing is going to automatically change because I, a black person in America, said so, when I look at everything that has to focus on black, unless you're in entertainment or if you're not a sports athlete, you're being degraded, you're marginalized, you're being killed on the streets. Why do I believe that voting is going to change? This is what people are asking, like, why do black people vote and why should we vote?
I think that's, yeah, I'm sorry.
You know what, the reason I'm gonna step in, only because I've been with Barry and have a relation with him for a long time. And I'll tell you, part of the reason that we talk about voting is because we recognize this as a part of the system of change. Part of it, not the system of change, part of the system of change. We have been at this work, our ancestors and our grandparents were at this work before we got here. We've been struggling and fighting for not equality, but for equity now for so long that when we talk to young people, they don't have a sense of anything of progress. So I don't think they see any of that. So for me, Barry, I think the reason that we do vote, or we talk about voting, is because we see voting as a part of the process. I'm going to honestly tell you that voting does not make anybody respect you, but changing things through voting, participation, reinvesting in our own community, investing in our own community, coming back to the neighborhoods where we once lived, and requiring those services to come back to the neighborhoods where we now reside. Is a part of it. I also will tell you that I'm going to challenge us to talk about who is being successful. And you look around this room, the six of us are signs of those who are trying to or succeeding in a system that still is against us. And whatever measure that we look at it, so for me, I also want to say there are people who are succeeding. They're not just athletes, they're just not entertainers, but they're everyday folks who are getting up every day and doing those things that they feel are needed for them to prosper, their families to prosper. And voting to me is just a part of that changing process.
Preach.
Can I? Oh, no, I wanted to jump in on so much of what Mr. Roberts said is just so true and so powerful, and it inspires you. Because here's the thing, just like what Barry said, if we vote, is it gonna change tomorrow? No, it's part of the process. It's just the start. But then it leads to engagement. When we talk about our various organizations, whether it's WAPA, which is Black Women Organized for Political Action, we do the endorsements. Well, guess what? When those candidates are elected, now we have outreach that we can go call them up and say, we'd like to schedule a meeting. And we do that. We've done that with Mr. Cerner. We've done that with Bina Lefkowitz, who's over Sacramento County Office of Ed. We now have that access. And even those that we didn't endorse, we need to follow up. We need to engage. One of the things that I have been priding myself on, and I know others can as well, is at the school board. Okay, how long have I been showing up at school board meetings? For the past year, just about. It's not one issue. I keep agitating, you just keep showing up. And you have to know how the process works, get involved in that process, and then just keep showing up, not going away. Because if you agitate long enough, you will see that change. And I think that's so important, and I think that's hitting on a lot of what you were saying and what you're talking about.
Yeah. Two things for me, again, Les Simmons. If the question is, why should we vote, right? For me, I feel like if you don't vote, somebody else is gonna vote for you.
Yeah.
Amen.
First off. And I would rather organize for more of us to vote in areas that we share and have some commonality with, right? We have some shared agreement on ballot issues, on measures, on individuals of like-mindedness. I would rather us come together and say, these are our issues, and we think that this individual or these ballots or these measures represent a positive direction regarding these issues. Now, they may not be fixed at one moment, but we will at least put them in power so we can work with them. That if we don't, as the Black community, as we don't, as folks that are underserved and in need of support and resources, somebody else will. But as a result of us leaning all the way in and doing, now we become a part of the process of change. And whatever ballots or measures are put in power, we become a part of that process of accountability. We become a part of process of receiving services and resources. We become a part of the process of reimagining what that future looks like now that the things that we have put in power are in power. And then secondly, I have kind of that moral kind of obligation of the only reason I'm here today is because I'm standing on the shoulders of those that came before me. Right? When I hear my grandmother say to me, Les, back in my day, first we couldn't even vote.
Yeah.
We couldn't even go to the public restrooms that were created for everybody. We had black and white restrooms, right? And we couldn't even cast our ballot. And it was riots as a result of us, trying to vote. It was a whole shift in the country, and we felt like we had accomplished something now that we had the right to vote. That was their fight. Ours is, now that we have moved on, let's continue on. Let's lean all the way in, and let's define what tomorrow will be by voting today. Our ancestors, grandparents, grandmothers, grandfathers, dads, moms, sweat and bled to be able to give us this right. Now it's our responsibility, and then it's the next generation's responsibility. Now you may have to cut me short a little bit because I got a combination of things working. I got the preacher in me working, I got the advocate in me working, then I got political Les kind of working, and then I got street Valley High Les kind of working. Like, y'all need to vote, right?
No, I mean, it's
And
not
lean into your mic. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So it's not it wasn't the magic pill in the 60s. It's not the magic pill in 2018. It's not the panacea that's going to fix everything. It's as my lovely colleagues have said, it is a step. It is a vehicle to make change. What does it get us? It does get us a seat at that table.
Mm-hmm.
As much as people may not think of it does. As someone who worked in the legislature, and as much as I thought I knew about politics, as much as we talked about it at the family table in my home, I didn't know a daggone thing until I worked in that building. And what matters to elected officials, to politicians, when they are running, is who votes. What neighborhoods they determine, they listen to, and Brother Darrell, you worked in that building too, is what neighborhoods have the highest propensity of voters.
That's it.
And so and I think that's where there is a disconnect because there aren't resources in communities, a lot of communities that look like us, and there is a lot of correlation because between not just the act of not voting, but the act of suppressing that vote.
Yes.
And that's the other thing that keeps ringing with me about why is voting important. And I think of, and I see Georgia, and I see Florida, and I see the resurgence of the new Jim Crow with the borrowing from the old Jim Crow. And I have to ask myself, and I would ask those same millennials today, or whoever's asking that question today, if it's not important to vote, if it's not valuable to vote, then why are there so many communities working so hard and putting tremendous resources in keeping that vote from us,
Yeah.
specifically from us?
Good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
1964 was the Civil Rights, Voting Rights Act, 1964. So when you start thinking about the vote and our ability really to vote, it's really only been since 64
Yeah.
in terms of our ability to righteously walk forward and vote. So the fight since then has been about, are we prepared to get through this fighting piece? And that's, I'm 59. It was 55 years ago, 54 years ago when we're talking about. So in that amount of time, there's still a process that we're working at, that we're working on, that we still have to figure out how do we coalesce, how do we work together, how do we grab millennials and make sure they're connected. Barry had a cadre, a pool of young people over the last month or two talking about the issue.
Right.
He's been doing that for as long as I can remember, but lately it's been focused on the election process itself and how to involve. How many of us can say that's what we're doing as well?
Right.
How many of the listeners who are here, those who are seeing us, can say that? Because Mama Ro, excuse me, Rolanda, the way, I'm
gonna call you Mama Ro.
Say that. It's okay. I love her. So when you said Mama Ro, I said, huh? Oh, yeah, Ro. So, but the work she has done with inspiring, opening up opportunities for those young women on the regular trips. That's the exposure that we have to do. That we make sure that everything that we're doing gives them an understanding of how you connect the dots.
Right.
Yeah.
So because I think many millennials nobody's really taking the time to help them connect the dots.
Yeah.
And if it's hard if you don't, if you're not in the building, or it's hard if you haven't been, in the streets and in the Capitol. It's hard if you haven't canvassed in the neighborhood and wondered why everybody who looks like you at that house no longer lives there, and they've moved, and the person at that house are not registered. And you start asking yourself, who lived here, and when did they leave, and the lack of stability in our neighborhoods for those who we want to educate. And when we talk about high propensity voters, that's the people who lived at that same house and voted for that same house the last 8 years. We don't always have that ability to be send information on the ballot measures because we no longer live there anymore. We've moved.
Yeah, I think that's so, when you said that high propensity voters, that is something. Looking at it through the lens, especially of the typical politician, whether they look like us or they don't, the reality is, if we're not that high propensity voter, they ignore us. That's really where your voice is not heard, and it's like they don't even see you. You know what? You ain't gonna vote, so I don't have to pay attention to you. I don't have to curry your vote. I don't have to do anything. Why? Because you don't vote, so I don't need to see you. I don't need to pay attention to you. I don't care about your needs.
Right.
Because you're not voting.
That's how come it's important to have community organizers, advocates, folks that are grounded on what the issues are, but not in a way where they're kind of just trying to line up people, but really in a way that they're listening to what people are saying, right? They create a space for young folks to not only say, hey, we need you to vote, but what are your needs? What are your convictions? What are your concerns? What do you want the next 10 years to look like in your life, right? And so I think it takes us as a community leaning all the way in and not just saying, oh, we support this, or oh, we're not going to speak on this issue because we don't want to speak on this issue because we're taking money to not speak on this issue. We have to really... we have to really, we got to go in there lean all the way in, have some prophetic leadership, prophetic vision, and really create what we want the next 4 years to look like, the next 8 years, the next 12 years, the next 20 years to look like. And that takes going all the way down, right, to those young folks in raising their voice up to the top of what change looks like, and allowing their concerns, their areas to rest on our shoulders as some leaders for today, and carry that to the polls, and then carry them with us, right?
Just real quick,
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
because there's some two things I want to touch on. First of all, I think a lot of us black folk, me myself, I'm only at the table to get what is mine.
See?
I don't want to be at your table.
Yeah.
That's my thing. And I think that we've gotten caught up with we're at the table. So that's almost like we arrived. It's almost kind of the same thing when, black independent music, you weren't mainstream until white folks started liking you. Like a Negro was like, yo, I ain't mainstream yet. But what about you ain't mainstream in your own black community? So our validation with white people has gotten to the point where we're like, well, we got to get to the table. And to me, I think the philosophy now is get what we need to get to build, because what we're owed. And I think the ideas that I'm having, and I think some of us are at the table are having, and a lot of the younger generation and some of the older generation that are ready and said, man, I've been waiting this for the longest time. Like Trump was the best thing for me that we could ever have, because if we had Hillary Clinton, niggas would have been comfortable again. They would have been telling me, what you talking about racism, and what are you saying? This Hillary's the best thing since sliced bread. But the reality I look at it is like, we have to occupy a space for a time being to create our own space.
Right.
And at the same particular time, I feel like it has to not only be focused on, or we just have to lean on the youth. No, we have to lean on each other. And I think when we keep on trying to engage in the idea of young people, it throws away some of these people, because everybody over here ain't too old. You know what I mean? We still got a lot of life left, but we have a lot of things that we can do to move it to the next level, which is needed. My key, as I just sat there and I threw a little shout out to the NAACP, 800K was given to one of their prolific leaders. And we know we have chapters in the NAACP all over the United States, and also one here in California. And we understand that, there's some propositions that they're not for, and a lot of us are for as black people with the divide. But I think the issue is with a lot of us when we talk about not voting is constantly seeing leadership that looks like us, not for us.
Right.
Black person who doesn't have a black agenda but has a white agenda and white intentions, that's more dangerous than having a white guy or a white woman in the position of power, because we can kind of rattle their chain a little bit. It's almost like we're yelling out Jim Cooper, and what has been the build to sit there and say, okay, we don't need Jim Cooper in that spot, right? Because for me, Jim Cooper ain't for black people. So it's kind of those things and those engagements. And even when I go deeper into it, Kevin Johnson was here for 8 years. 8 years. And many of us sat by and just stood while he did things not only to the community, but to the young women in our community, and stayed silent. I have an issue when we sit there and we talk about voting if we're not going to hold integrity to that part of voting, but we got to kind of like, well, that's KJ, he did it on the side, but when it becomes a big show and a big party, now it gets exposed, now everyone's like, well, yeah, see, I told you so, but we knew that coming in. I have people that have detailed conversations about, well, he was doing this since back when, so how the hell did he become a mayor? And how did black people sit around here and allow it? And I think that the black leadership of today has to be challenged, that we talk about going to vote, but people are looking at you guys like, right now, like, how can I trust you black leaders and showing me the right route when so much of our black leadership has held us to a place, whereas Martin Luther King said, a burning house. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at right
So
now.
I think the next question would be, when we get the whole thing around voting, so I'm thinking like, how do you come up with propositions? How do you get on the ballots? I think we missed all of that. I also think the other part is that as family, we haven't really had a family meeting. And so we're kind of like all over the place, because even in Africa, there's different tribes, there's different nations, we've always been that way. None of us have always been one people. Like, we gonna all agree. However, how do we get to that place where we can be more strategic in the way we choose to support whoever we're supporting?
Right.
Because nobody is perfect. Who's ever gonna run for office, somebody got little dirt or something somewhere. How do we hold
Well,
people
how much dirt?
accountable?
It's some dirt that be like,
Mud
You get to be
bags.
president. Sometimes you get to be president with
Yeah.
all your dirt out loud and still in court. But
Yes.
how do we hold people accountable for our communities that we represent? How do we do that after the vote? Like, I'm excited. Voting is great.
yeah, black, white,
How do
or
we
indifferent.
how do we hold them accountable?
I think you come back to after election, and I think various points are fair points. Rolanda said, but we don't sit down and talk about things. So various, sometimes silent, or not silent, never been silent, various lone voice about the issues aren't brought into the room where we really can have a conversation. And I think the beauty of the process is that you're there now. And whether you look at it as they're at the table or having influence, that's the piece. So for me, I focus back on the young people saying, when they get discouraged, I can say, but look at Barry. In spite of all the other things that he's dealt with, he's now in a position to be able to have that impact. Lead that movement that's necessary. I also say that those at the table need to be held accountable. And whoever's there at the table needs to be held accountable. The meeting of the family that occurs right after the election does not often occur. We know it's going to occur this time. We know it's going to occur because no matter what side folks are on, folks are going to say we got to sit down, because if you're on the yes on Measure U side, if you're talking about investment in our community, you sure better be talking to our community, and you sure better be meeting in our communities, and we better come together soon, because other communities are already meeting. Because they already supporting you. Yes, on Measure U because it da for me. And they say for me, not for us, or not for our neighborhoods or our communities. They speak for them. So so in my opinion, we're at that point now. We take it from here, and where do we go tomorrow? Where do we begin pushing the next meeting? We had numerous meetings prior to Measure U when the election today. We had numerous meetings there. Now, we're going to follow up those with numerous meetings after. And first of all, our neighborhoods, our specifically, then come back together to say, this is what we're looking at in our neighborhoods. How do we work together to make sure it goes to the council as a citywide neighborhoods agenda? Because that's how others do it. You know, so we talk about
So
that
when you
process.
say hold people accountable, give us some steps to do that.
That includes being at a meeting, bringing them to our meetings, making sure they hear our issues, make sure they're written down, that they have things to walk away with, that we follow up with them at the city council, the county board of supervisor, at the state capitol, because if those issues are going to be talked about any of those places, we have to be there for both the subcommittee meetings as well as the city council meeting. So if it's the 3 o'clock meeting you need to be at, or the 10 o'clock meeting you need to be at, as well as the 6 o'clock meeting, that all of those is where we need to be. And we need to start finding out who can attend those meetings now so that we can help them hold folks accountable. Being in the audience is a beginning of that. Seeing how folks are voting and making sure you document how did they vote on the issue that we brought to them. Because in the end of the day, if they don't, as my grandfather would say, if they don't do what we want them to do, we vote them out. He would say, vote the rascal out. I would simply say, vote them out. And that, therefore, whether it be a Jim Cooper, whether it be a Kevin Johnson, whether it be a Darryl Steinberg, whether it's Scott Jones, you have to vote them out. But if we are not sophisticated enough to vote on a regular basis, they stay there because we did not hold them accountable in the voting process. That's the ultimate accountability, saying, oh no, I'm sorry, next. You know, we're not gonna vote put your box anymore.
And that goes back to what we were talking about before a little bit, as far as not just waiting for the board meetings. I think that the board meetings are good and they're very important, but also having standing meetings. One of the things that we were looking for is having some standing meetings, whether they're quarterly or monthly or whatever, with some of those elected officials, where it's one-on-one or one official and you have a group of 3 or 4 and they stay engaged, and it's standing. You don't wait. You have it, okay, every Monday or whatever it is, every Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever day it is, first Monday of the month, we're going to be talking to you, council member. First Monday of the month, we're going to be talking to, supervisor this or that. So you have those standing meetings and you build that relationship so that they know where you're coming. And when it's time and you gotta mobilize folks to come to the board
Show
meeting or
up.
whatever, you're right there.
Yeah.
And everybody knows.
And that's how come it's important to have like community organizers within the community. I've been blessed to be able to work with, Shonda Johnson years ago when the first Measure U ballot was introduced, and really harnessed the community's voice in a ways that really lifted that forward to create the things that we needed to create and put our agenda forward. And then after Shonda, it was Danielle Williams and having her organize the community. Now it's Ryan McClinton who we're working with now, but it's multiple community organizers that are really working to capture the voice of the collective. Because most folks on a daily basis can't come to a city council meeting, right? They got jobs, they got kids, they got careers, things like that. But if we lift up a shared vision, a shared concern, then that community organizer folks work to do that. I also think that part of the question of young folks is saying, why does it even matter, is because people have sat at these places of power and built their own empires up, and have left out people that need to be remembered, need to be thought about. So when the tide of economic development, when the tide of jobs and workforce readiness, when the tide of resources comes through the community, it doesn't catch us all. And it poses the question for us of what happened to us? Why are we forgotten about? That day is over. The day we're living in now is we're gonna ensure that when those folks get in office that they represent us, because it's gonna be our people. When these ballot measures are put on, we're not only gonna vote for them, we're gonna be on the commissions to ensure that it is doing what it's designed to do. And if that doesn't work, if the commission doesn't have enough power, we're gonna show up at city council and we're gonna hold them accountable. We're gonna be there, there's a few of us gonna be there every single week, like this, saying, hey, what's up? And adding that public comment piece. I think where we are at today is we have to lean all the way in. And we have to have people that are willing to lean all the way in, that have studied these ballot measures, have studied the politics around city government and ordinances and things like that, to really kind of help navigate our community and lift it forward.
So y'all have a few comments, and I haven't been reading any of the comments out loud. I have to read this one. Betty Crocker, that's the woman's name. She says, we're in the age of self, so I always wonder how can a small group that still believes in blacks as us, we, and our, get to the masses to create a mindset change. Through love and kindness, I have drawn 3 or protests and petitions. Voting is great, but with every vote, there's always another side to the vote, which is true. I mean, in the family, you could have, all of us could be in the family and all have different opinions. We all know that.
Right.
But I guess it's like, how do we find that commonality? Because I think sometimes we think everybody's going to be the exact same page. And I like when my girl said, we could just all be in the same book. That would be beautiful. What are some of those commonalities? Because when you hear Latinos, immediately people think family. It's so family driven, which is probably true. I mean, but I know that we are too.
Yeah.
But why doesn't that come to mind when we think about black people?
Yeah.
Why are we always on the deficit?
Because in large part of that is who is telling the narrative about black people. I mean, what we see in the media is a small, tiny segment of what a black family is. A black family is a lot of things.
Right.
We're not monolithic either. I don't know why people keep wanting to put us in one little box.
Yeah.
When
Remember, we all look the same.
right.
I'm seeing all kind of shades over here, right? Remember that? That's what they fed us with, though, right?
Right. And so, there are these images, and it pisses me off. Excuse my language. But as a daughter of a strong, proud black man, as a sister of a black man, as an aunt of black men now, who are raising families of their own, I have multiple examples in my immediate family of black men who are not only doing right or done right, God rest my dad's soul, for their families, but for their greater communities. Those conversations I talk about at the dinner table, my daddy had to do that, along with my mama. And so, you know, the fact that, you know, it was drilled in my head, Omega, you're not just a citizen of the United States, you're a citizen of the world. Don't let what's going on in this country limit you and your possibilities is a message that my daddy gave me from the time that I was knee-high to a grasshopper. So I think also in that is when we talk about elected officials, you know, I think what we do is we don't even realize we're doing it. We kind of put them on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And instead of realizing that they're people, they're human beings with human feelings, but they are also vehicles to make change. They're not the panacea either.
Right.
I mean, Lord knows I was one of them who campaigned for President Obama in 2008. I did the same thing in 2012 from here and there. And but he was and when he was elected in 2008, all of a sudden
Champagne, baby.
right, and black people were gonna be liberated. I don't know where
The
that
White
came
House
from.
was black. I had my plate ready to go.
You got your key to it.
Oh,
huh?
come on, brother.
Don't go cook in the kitchen.
Brother, I was gonna do it all.
Exactly. But
Be like brother man.
exactly. But he was one step. And
Yes.
it's just like, and we do. You know, I'm an organizer by nature. That's what I do. So I believe that in order, if we're going to change it, we have to build power in our communities.
Right.
And our
Absolutely.
communities have to understand they have power. They cannot have a dime, but they have power. Power is not just money. Power is organized people. And so if people understand that, good organized people will beat $1 any day. And what has happened is because that same machine, that media machine that has told us and projected images of us that say hoodie, a young black man wearing a hoodie is dangerous, that same machine that's telling us that our families are the black family is gone, or everybody's strung out on something, or all the daddies are in jail, are the same ones who are telling us that we have no power. That again is intentional. And so as soon as we realize that and come together and put our collective voices together, that's when we see change. We're seeing it today. I mean, how many of us have read articles or seen on the news or so on about the number of ballots that have been turned in before today? People, right? I voted yesterday. People, you know, when they come together and they realize that we come together on common values and not on parties. And not on other people's agendas, but we are elected officials who are aligned with our values, who are truly representing us. And then if they're not, we vote their tails out.
Right.
Then that's when we get power.
So let me say this, the young people who went last night, they were college educated, they were very smart, but they did not feel like they were really listening to the machine. So I get that part. I've been hearing that my whole life. I also think we have to have accountability for what we do as black people. There is a divide with middle class black folks with education as opposed to people who did not get a college degree and is low income. There's a huge divide in the black community. And so when somebody from a middle class, hoity-toity background telling you you should go some way, but they haven't looked out for you, the way you have been standing on my neck to get to where you are, that's when you take care of family business. Because the media machine, you can tell us stuff all day long. We're going to do what we want to do. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We're not robots. You make up your mind. I watch kids make up their mind, and adults too, not just kids. There's a lot of adults who don't believe voting works. You start talking about, I tell people, like, respect my belief. I believe in voting. So I'll be my head and be like, ugh.
Don't be too honest now, Queen.
No, I'll be like, look, 'cause I vote for my ancestors, so that's what does it for me. Even if I believe something ain't gonna work, I'll be like, I still don't do it.
Right.
But I feel like that's the conviction. I think at some point we got to do some house cleaning
We do.
to make any of this stuff work.
We do.
And we know that there's a divide.
It's a combination of both because it is. Because yes, we absolutely do. But please don't think that machine doesn't play a role in that.
No, it does.
No, we
Here's the
know
thing.
that we play
We
some
know
role.
that,
We know
but
that.
I think
We know
that
that.
young people are hip that we gonna say that because we don't want to have accountability.
Oh,
Instead of saying, I don't know, my mom used to say, I don't know what they said over here, but this is what I raised you over here to
Me and
do.
my house.
I had that everywhere I went. Not my mom, y'all, everybody I've been with is like, bro, I expect this of you. I can't say, well, the TV is telling me, but you could not say nothing like that to my mother.
I think it's also, so and you said it, you said it, our community has a generational split as well as an economic split. And my challenge for us, and I gotta say something, Barry and I have gone through a lot of growth together. I've come to respect him as a man and a leader. I met him as a young leader and a young man doing his thing. Yeah, you know that. I've been there. But the part that I'm going to say to you is one of the biggest, protectors of what Daryl Roberts is doing has been Berry Accius. And I say that because when people don't understand you, don't see you close enough to understand. I know I have faults, not even question, but I also know the commitments. Sometimes we don't know the person's commitment, and because they wear a cover, because they happen to be middle class or live in another neighborhood, we might misunderstand their commitment to the cause, a commitment to the growth of our community, our neighborhoods. And what I will say to you is, even with the NAACP, there are members in the NAACP on tomorrow. I want to talk about where do we go moving forward. Not everybody, because not everybody got it. But those who said no on Measure U, I'm going to understand based on conversation with them why they said no, and ask them, starting tomorrow, I need you to help me, because you were talking about the savings, or you were talking about some things that you saw differently than I did. I'm going to assume Measure U wins, and tomorrow we're talking about what do we do in our neighborhoods, how do we cause money to be saved at the city level that you see, because you're with the NAACP and you've supported that. But show us that too. Show us where that savings is. You handle that part. We'll take this part here. We'll move forward and we'll work together. But going back to what Rolanda said, how do we sit around the dinner table together, the imaginary dinner table, if you will? How do we make sure we're meeting and talking in this way come tomorrow, come next week, come the months to come and the years to come?
Yeah. I was going to say, one of the things when you talk about that, and how can we get back to that whole shared value? Here's the thing when you talk about that whole middle class and we middle class and what have you. But when you talk about that generational wealth for black folks, what happens? We middle class today, then our children are not middle class tomorrow. All of a sudden, that happens for us more than anybody else. Well, let's talk about a shared value there. What do we want to see for our children? How are we transferring that generational wealth, that generational knowledge, that generational, coming together, organizing and everything else? That's a shared value. Because we all of a sudden, we all in the same boat. It's not just, middle class or, the lower income and everything else. Why can't we transfer? What's going on there? That sounds like it needs to be some education for the old heads as well as the young heads. Let's deal with that.
I think that reflects in our vote. I think that reflects in the vote. I think sometimes younger generation, what we call it, but also some of the young people aren't just on an island by themselves. They're attached to us. Yes. So sometimes what you're seeing young people do is something they learned from the generation before. And so if you feel what they say disenfranchised, it just doesn't go away because you were able to get to Sac State. I have a lot of young people struggling their way through college because some of this stuff ain't adding up. And now they're in debt. And so how do we get them to vote for something? It's like, well, how is that really going to affect me for real? Not in the imaginary, but how is this really going? It's like when we repealed the car tax. That affected some people immediately because the registration, this was some years ago, went back down. That's something you can immediately see. How do you, not say that has to be immediate, but how do we buy into this, whether if you're middle class or low income? There used to be a commonality with black people. Even if you had middle class people, there was still some people who were low income at the table. You didn't
I think we were all understanding of who first was thy enemy, who was the beast, and that system wouldn't let up on any Negro. And I share it, and I don't, I hate to use the word, we'll go there. Forgive me, my brother. When the nigger was able to get money, that changed the whole dynamics of thought process. Because now the nigger can still be the nigger. I can be this and still get paid? Oh, most definitely. Go and do your. Where before it was like, you getting pulled by your collar, like, you can't do that. There's got to be respectability. There has to be integrity in our community. You just wasn't going to be able to move around here and do to our women that you're doing, sell drugs in our community. There was some chambers that you have to get to. And before, we stood by that. It was almost codes that we didn't even have, but we had. Now we don't have that. So then when you go into this newer lens where we're yelling at, okay, vote blue, vote red. And then some of us are looking like, well, either red or blue ain't gonna work for us. Our youth are looking at it, and some of our older heads, like people like who are more on the revolutionary side and the more of the black liberation side, is like, well, them don't work, so why aren't we creating black political parties? Maybe not even one, but parties. But then we still currently have Negroes who are gatekeepers telling us, well, this is the same way we're supposed to go, but this hasn't worked. And I think that, yes, there are some wins. There are some people that we can say, A's done this, B's done that. We get excited by the symbolism, and Obama was a part of the symbolism that Negroes get caught up with, the emotional lens. That's why people are just emotional, and sometimes black people with our vote are more emotional. So that's why Donald Trump can throw a Mexican immigrant out there that said he wish he could have killed more people, and people are like, oh yeah, so I'm gonna vote for this because I have that fear factor. It gets played out in politics all the time. My thing is, when we talk about lens of advocating for something different, why haven't we struck that core and said, let's separate from the power structure, still vote, but let's separate from the power structure where they'll understand black people aren't getting represented by a Democrat or a Republican. We understand the rules of engagement because we can't just manifest ourselves out of the system just yet. But why are we challenging the norm and saying, let's go do something different? And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, why haven't we, with all of these creative ideas, with all of these people that have seen what it's been for years and years and will continue to be decades, we keep on sitting in a burning house thinking Democrat or Republicans going to change, and it's not going to change. So what do we do with that?
Yeah, I think we're at a place to where we have to not forget of whose shoulders we've been standing on.
Yes.
Right on.
Folks that are middle class, upper class, in the higher brackets financially, can't forget that most of the time they didn't get there alone. They're standing on the shoulders of their parents, of their mentors, of their friends, and if they can't find them, you standing on the shoulders of folks that were oppressed. And don't forget about that when you have progressed in life and moved on to certain financial bracket. We have to really stay grounded in the reality of the majority of the black community. We have to stay grounded that our people need help. Stay grounded that folks are in education, that there's some real challenges with our young folks. Stay grounded in the fact that at one point the black community made up and still makes up the majority that's incarcerated, and now that cannabis is legal, right?
Yes.
Our folks been
Yes.
doing that for a long time, getting locked up for 20 years and 10 years, and
And
now
they
that it's
debating
legal.
about taking us out, right?
Exactly,
Yes.
and now that it's legal, and they should be at the front of the line, and you know, it's right. So it's a lot that we have to represent and make right, and we need political leaders to make it right. We need to come together to put ballots on and vote for ballots that make it right. We got to lean all the way in and see it very clearly. It does take listening, though. If we aren't coming together, even with some differences of opinions on certain things, and at least listening to the commonality of we need help or we're struggling, then I think that's a challenge all in of itself. And then if we're not coming together and not only listening, but saying, okay, part of the progression of change is this and it's that, meaning part of it is voting. Part of it is placing that ballot in. And as soon as you turn in, 18, you're turning in that ballot and voting. Tonight, there should be at all of the polling stations within our community a flood of the black and brown community leaning all the way in on issues that are important to us, right? We know it's some real issues. We know we can look very clearly and see that we have some areas we can all come up in, right?
The largest caucus right now is the Latino caucus, is that correct? Inside of government. The largest caucus is the Latino caucus, because even Pacific Islanders are in there as well. A little something. And all I'm saying is, when Brown is doing pretty good. Brown is doing pretty good. See, I spent a lot of time in Latin America with people of Latin descent, and particularly those who are black. And so we lean far, we include more people in on our lean than they include us in on their lean. I speak a little Spanish, I know a little something.
But that's because us as people.
But I don't think I get you past the
Yeah.
but I also think it's the hardest thing for us to just focus on self.
Us.
Because I'm gonna tell you why. I'm with them all the time, and they're never including us most times. They start speaking Spanish. If you don't know a little something, you out. No, honestly.
No.
But yet we have, and see, I
Just
always
being
say,
honest,
always
huh?
say black folks has always been the floor for
Mhm.
everybody. My homeboy in Chicago always says we all started off in the back of the bus, but they advanced in seats and we still in the back of the bus. So I feel like it's okay to focus on stuff. I almost
Completely.
think they want us to focus on stuff.
Completely.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
And I think
I
we-
don't think focus on yourself don't mean you anti anybody else.
No.
Yeah.
But I'm like, the first thing they tell you to do on the plane, if the plane going there, they don't say go there and put the mask on your neighbor.
Yeah.
They say put the mask on yourself so you
Preach.
can help people.
Preach.
Yes.
I
That's
think-
all I'm saying.
No, I hear you. We have to
So,
be unapologetically about
They don't need us.
black business,
Yes.
about
But we're
us,
struggling.
about us. We have to acknowledge it. We have to lean all the way into it, and we have to create a space that takes us forward, right?
What is Measure U? And why is that such a hot topic?
half-cents tax of, additional half-cents tax on top of our sales tax of 8.25. So if it's approved, it'll go to 8.75. 8 cents and three-quarters of a cent sales tax. 50% of that money that comes in, probably about $100,000, probably already earmarked to law enforcement, public safety. The other 50%. Other 50% of money coming in is on the table for discussion with others. Those of us who have said we support Measure U looks at that as an opportunity to reinvest in our community, to invest in our youth, to invest in employment opportunities for those who are underemployed, for those in the homeless community. Look at it as a way to address some of the homeless issues in our community. There are others who see that as an opportunity for developers to get ahead on the riverfront and other parts. No matter what it is, it's additional revenue because it's not earmarked any place that's available for us all to, whether you say fight or advocate for, that's what it is. And I'll tell you something that's interesting. What we don't recognize is that the reason that the previous funding primarily for Measure U went to police and fire is because that's what the voters wanted. See, we gotta talk about that connection back to the people who voted for that, the typically older white person who voted for that. Reality, that Republican, Democrat, older white person who voted for that wanted more police, wanted the fire station to stay open and not have brownouts. They then thought, man, the parks would be good because it'll, that's there. But they weren't talking about stuff for our kids. They really weren't. They weren't talking about resources for our
They
neighborhood.
never will.
Yeah, so for, as to Barry's point, not only should we be at the table, we also need to create opportunities where we are doing things for ourselves. And I think that's the difficult part, because what seems to happen in all of these situations, too often we're fighting against each other. At the end of the day, rather than coming together and talking, now where do we go? We sit there either celebrating that we won 2008 and not being prepared in 2010. I'm gonna go back to Obama, because my challenge for all of us is to think about the reality of chess. If you only deal with that one move, the next move matters, and the next move matters, and the next move matters. So now, if Measure U were to pass, there has to be coming together to talk about where are we investing. What are we supporting? What are we supporting in terms of not just services, but also investment opportunities in our community? And who are we bringing to the table to make sure that investment happens? And who is going to be our advocate, not just around the table, but at the dais when they vote, but also in the rooms when it's being discussed when we're not in that meeting? Because as somebody, we've said often, there are meetings before the meeting that occurs to talk about the meeting that's
We
about
ain't
to
there.
occur. And we're not there. And if we're not there, we sure better recognize what we're not there and figure out a way to make sure we have influence there.
So say if it does pass, how do you really determine where that money goes? I think that's where people get a little hung up on. It's like we always hang at good times, we always hanging our hopes on something. And then we don't know where that money goes. Like, how is it that the police, I get that they voted for it, but how do we have these savings in our city, and then it's like it goes to every other community? They'll be talking about undocumented people. Well, we've been documented all this time, but we ain't got nothing. So I don't quite understand, how does that money, and I'm pretty sure other people don't, how do you know who will get that money or how it will come into our community?
Yeah, isn't it also, Daryl, that on the measure itself, it says that there has to be certain groups that are experts on the commission who's going to do the oversight and
So
what
the
have you?
council voted on putting together somewhat of an accountability board,
Right.
where there'll be 9 people selected by the council and the mayor, then 2 experts, and I think in employment development and economic development that will be a part of that that would set the priorities. We have to be there. We have to have people on the board. We have to attend those meetings. We have to talk to those people and make sure that they understand what's important. They're the people who need to be the first people we talk to, and along with our city council members to talk about how do we do that. So there are accountability pieces in place, but we have to play a role in that. So those of us who are walking now, young people who are walking now, we got to talk to them. Seniors who are concerned about their grandkids, we also got to ask them, if you're free and you're able to, can you sit in and here, and we need you to talk about your grandson's lack of opportunities and employment so that we can talk about your grandson benefiting for whatever is next because of funding coming from Measure U. The piece that you talked about, though, that the money goes to the general fund, and that's where when other people recognize, there's always money for something that they think is important. So let me give you an example, and I'll tell you the meeting lesson I were at. We're at a meeting probably about 4 or 5 months ago, and a budget meeting. It's in May, and they're talking about the budget. At that point, they had just talked about the city Parks and Recs budget, but they hadn't talked about anything outside of the city Parks and Recs budget. So I got up and I said, well, I'd like some funding support for Roberts County Development Center. We work in citywide, work in 5 city council districts. We work with 700 kids. We employ 60 people. We feel like we could use support from the city to help us with our efforts. I stood up right after I heard that there was a request from Land Park to put $250,000 into Land Park to help the golf course. See, so if you got $250,000 to help the golf course, I know I better stand up now and ask for some support now, because that's the piece we don't. But remember, I was there at the meeting, and I had relationships that allow me to recognize I got to stand up, and whether we accept it or not, it's still about relationships. It's still about what are we going to do tomorrow to make sure that those relationships that we have established prior to. Barry says, you owe us. And if you owe us, we're not coming to beg for nothing. And I was going to say beg for shit, but I'm not supposed to say that. We're not
already cursed already.
That's all right. So, and again, that's the relationship that's developed between Barry and I. But the deal is this, that we have to recognize if we're putting in a sweat, we sure better to have a return on our investment. We are invested just like everybody else. So it's just like the senior who wants more police. We have to speak up and talk about that, and we have to be prepared to recognize the reason that the senior is heard so often is because he or she is considered a high propensity voter.
Yes,
I think
yes.
Daryl, you did it.
Hold on, she
Go
was
ahead.
gonna say something. I'm sorry, sis. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. And I think what we have to also realize is that every avenue of advocacy is not for everyone.
Yeah.
We have more militant brothers and sisters who are about shutting down the streets, and that has an important role, absolutely important role in building power in community, because it brings attention and it gets what done.
Right.
We have people who are the lobbyists and the things like that. As long as they understand that it's about these values and this vision, then absolutely. But their role is also to train others, because everybody can share their story. If you can share your story, you can lobby. And then there's people who can, be at the council meetings. But the thing is then we have to make sure we have a cohesive strategy of bringing all those people together, making sure we're sharing all the information, and we're coming up with as a friend of mine says, pragmatic next steps in order to not only to grow that influence with those relationships, but actually use those relationships and that influence to build change. Because ultimately, this is love it or leave it, it's the United States of America. Those relationships play a role, and we do need to change the table. And one of the ways that we change the table is not only as we're coming to the table, that is recognizing that in itself is a privilege. And not just a privilege because of the elected officials. No, that's our spot. They need to give it to us. But we have a privilege and a responsibility to use that privilege to bring others along and to empower them. And I think that goes back to that middle class conversation. If our people are not realizing that in itself is a form of privilege that not every single one of us have, and that we are to lean into that privilege and use that privilege to bring our brothers and sisters along, then we are doing a disservice.
At least leaving the door open.
You said some key things, kind of like leaning into that, right? And Daryl, you really summed it up really well around the opportunities for what Measure U presents. And I would say, and just continuing that, is that we need continued opportunity and resources for our community, right? The Black community, to specifically move us in a better direction in multiple areas. So in the area of housing, and workforce readiness, jobs, creating jobs, business development, redevelopment, opportunities for youth, right? That all are on the table when there's funds on the table. I've been there in our city when it's no budget for some of the work that all of us are doing around youth development. We gonna get it done. That's just the way we are, right? We gonna make it happen. You know, it's like sitting in mama's kitchen and you don't have too much, but somehow mama figures out how to make dinner work. You might be eating some chicken liver and some gravy with some onions in there that kind of tastes like a steak a little bit, or some other chicken, but we know it's not the real deal.
But here's the thing about it. But if I know Ruth Chris is around the corner and I have access to it, I want Ruth Chris.
I want Ruth Chris, and this right here presents that opportunity to serve up a full course meal that we not only are setting at the table, we're setting the table.
We're not on the menu.
We're not on the menu no more. We're setting the table for what we want to create and what future we want to create for the Black community, right? In areas of South Sac, Oak Park, Del Paso, Midtown, and making sure that the businesses reflect us, making sure the opportunities that are given, we're at that table, and we're not just there for our little, our little base. We're opening the door so everybody could come in. When we go to get support for youth programming and youth services, there's funds to be able to do that, right? And this Measure U is that opportunity for us and for our community to bring us up. And because we're not only sitting at the table, we're setting the table. I think it's a whole different ball game than what it was before.
When is voting again? So today is voting. Everybody go out vote. When is the next time? Your opponent is already like 20 years ahead on this plan. So when is the next voting?
Was it 2020?
Yeah,
March
2020.
2020.
Yeah.
Election has changed,
Okay.
and that becomes the chess game. So who are we thinking about running in 2020 in the areas where elections will be held? Whether it be the council races, whether it be the county board of supervisors, school districts, those are the things now we begin talking about,
Right.
so that by early next year, we start talking about those things. Let me say one more thing though. I want to talk about effectiveness, because Barry talked about it a couple weeks ago when we were at a meeting together, and Barry said, where I had to speak up, the mayor was at a meeting and there was a group of 50 or 60 youth advocates around the table, and Barry consistently said, but what about Black youth? But what about Black youth? And whether the mayor accepted or not, Barry had been saying it so much that it filtered to his brain, and what came out of his mouth was the importance of Black youth and the communities where they live. From there, because he had done that, there was $500,000 that hadn't been spent, that was sitting in the general fund, that had been designed for something else. Barry opened the door, the mayor said, well, let me tell you what we got. We can look at ways to put this 500,000, and if I didn't say mayor, I'm sorry, 500,000 out in the streets for nonprofits. Because he said that, I just put my hand
And
up
I
and
didn't get
said,
any of the money anyway.
that's okay. Well,
That's a part of the process.
It wasn't about that. It wasn't about you getting the
Correct.
money.
That's what I mean. It's about
No, I just said that because
The
some people
opportunity.
some people hear 500,000
Yeah.
and they're gonna think Barry's gonna pull up in a Porsche.
So-
No, I didn't get the money.
So
But I opened up the opportunity.
Opened up the opportunity, and then we had other conversations that said, well, this can't go to the traditional folks who got budgets above $1 million, but above $500,000.
Boys
So
and
that-
Girls Clubs and all those
The
places.
Robert Fan Development Center, Center for Fathers and Families. It can't go to them. It has to go to smaller nonprofits. And then from there, we had a series of meetings where we were trying to get people qualified for that funding. We gotta continue to work with each other, open the doors, assist each other, be qualified, but also to help each other be accountable. See, because if you get $15,000 for a summer program and you've never done that, you need help to figure out how to do it effectively, but also how to show you did it effectively.
Let me just add to that. And we have to do it in a way that's selfless,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
We have to lean in. We may not get nothing from it, but it's right
Yes,
for
sir.
our community.
Right.
It's right for the next
Somebody's
generation.
winning.
And somebody's winning.
Yeah.
That is the job of us leaders right now. It may not never come through the doors of what our base is, but it's good for the people,
Yes, indeed.
right? And we got to kick those doors wide open. In my closing, definitely, we have our voting center open tonight. The polls are open.
Yeah, you gotta go over there right now.
Yeah, I gotta go over there I get to go over there right now, watch folks come and turn in their ballots, right? I get to go. It's a beautiful thing. This past Sunday, we did our voter Sabbath Sunday, and folks came in, and it's not church as normal. It's not church as usual. I said, I want you to bring them Bibles, but I want you to bring them ballots, right?
Yeah.
And today we're pushing folks to come out 7710 Stockton Boulevard. If you're in the South, there's multiple places you could drop your ballot off at. But it's important, and I'm thankful for this dialogue, this conversation. We're gonna have a lot more. I know we got some things coming up in 2020 that we need to lean all the way in. It's gonna come like tomorrow. Lean all the way in. So, I'm grateful for the space and for the work that you guys have worked to really ground our community, right?
That he's leaving don't mean everyone else is leaving.
So,
I understand, but still, thank you.
For the
Okay.
North area, if you're over there at 3725 Marysville Boulevard, the Urban League, the Greater Sacramento
Yeah.
Urban League, is also a voter center, and they're open all day for you to drop off. So if you're on that side of town, you're not sure where to go, what to do, you can stop on by the Urban League and drop off your ballot. If you lost your ballot, you can get a ballot there. If you didn't register, you also can register there as well today with an ID. And a second, and yes, on the spot
Wow,
registration
yeah.
and
Yes,
voting.
that's good to
See,
know.
that's
Yeah.
the piece. One of my neighbors didn't realize he could go over to the Urban League. So when I leave here, I'm going to bang on his door and say, I told you we're going over here. Now, I don't need to tell him about Measure U, because that's not the importance. The importance really, though, is that he recognizes you got to vote. You have a daughter in elementary school. You need to start being engaged in the process. And that's it. We've got to be engaged in the process. We just have
And
to.
we have to find our own candidates.
Yep.
Yes.
And run our own candidates.
Talk to him.
And
Talk to him.
That's real
get
talk,
folks
though.
on
Come
boards
on,
and
Queen.
commissions,
Yes.
and get them into the system.
Right.
It didn't just start, we had the conversation before we started, the fact that a majority of the state legislatures are conservative wasn't by accident, and it didn't start last week.
It was by design.
It was by design.
And when we talk about the importance of voting, and we say that, why should we vote? We just talked about, what, school board,
Yeah.
the education, right? We talk about a Sacramento County Board of Supervisors. That is dealing with all of the county, not just the city politics. And I think that we move so much on city council, but it's taught things. Now we know how to design ourselves in a city dynamics. Now we have to design ourselves in the Sacramento County Super Board dynamic, because we are allowing them to get away with a lot of stuff because we don't show up at their board of supervisor meeting like we do the city council and give the city council all kind of hell,
Yeah.
right? And then when you look at it as far as the governor, you should look at it as the mayor and those ones that kind of represent us in our state, and then you open it up to the national propositions, measures. Folks have to understand in the lobbying process where they go into the little small doors and the small conversations like this, and they get thrown down to the house, and they say, okay, well, let's put this on the ballot, and then we have to vote it yes or vote it no to go to the next one. The process, we don't learn that. We don't understand that, and it's a lot of, because of not, I won't say negligence or ignorance, it's just because we are being in survival mode. We've been in survival mode just to, one, stay ahead, to two, be accepted, and to three, find our place. We don't have a place here in America. That's why I'm saying, and I'm pushing, people, please vote. Vote with strategy. Vote as a businessman or a businesswoman. Vote as a chess player, but don't vote as a Democrat or a Republican. If you have to vote independent, and even more, put black political party. We ain't made it up yet, but we're going to. I really think that lean in that's kind of like the statement, lean in and just being honest. We're good at this, and it's kumbaya, and it's great, and it's lovely, but really, how much intention are you guys as leaders really ready? And Queen asked about the accountability, but really ready to start challenging those folks that some of y'all might be friends with that still hold these higher positions, because I've made the statement over and over again. we've had 4 black city council members at one particular time. Black people still ain't got a pot to piss in here in Sacramento. More or less, what is also telling, when we have black tragedies and moments where black people are being disrespected. We just had another moment where this neo-Nazi, white supremacist group came to a capital for the second time within the last 3-4 years to do whatever. Not one black leader in a high position came out and spoke or made a statement for us to feel confident, like they're understanding. It was just another day in a park. So my problem is, when does the black leadership that has the position that we put them in, when do they say something? Do they say something when a photo op comes? Do they say something when now it's national news? Because we've been hooping and hollering about a lot of stuff, police accountability. We were talking about that in 2013, 2014, and Kevin Johnson flat out told us Sacramento was not like Ferguson. I sat there and said, Mr. Johnson, Sacramento was just like Ferguson. We just won national moment away. And here came our national moment, right? So I want to say I have confidence in my colleagues, but I really don't. I really don't have the confidence because I've seen it from the outside, and going in the inside, it's even worse. I don't have confidence that folks that are at the gate are going to challenge because of relationships, because of status quos, because of you're not supposed to say something. Because if we're really truly challenging people, whether they're black or white, I think things would be different.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And there was something that the pastor said before he left that really resonated with me, and I want to just kind of go back and talk about those homespun values, those family values that we all have. I'll never forget, I used to work on an assembly line way back before I got my degree or anything like that. I was on an assembly line, and I got a little promotion. I was kind of young, but I got a little promotion. There was one older black lady who was on that assembly line. Now, you guys know what happens when you get a little promotion and you first-time manager and all of that. The other ladies are like, and then they slow down their work. Do you know that older black lady worked twice as hard to make sure I was looking good? You know that old value, those old values. I'm not standing on my shoulders by myself. There is somebody else's shoulders I'm standing on.
Right on.
We all do that. And I know that that's a common theme. That's a shared value we all have, standing on somebody else's shoulders. How much of the social media has been showing about Fannie Lou Hamer or some of the others that we are standing on? We got to go back and just remember that, remind each other of that. No matter where we are, low income, high income, whatever, we standing on somebody else's shoulders from way back when.
Absolutely. And our job is to understand that we are preparing the next generation to stand on ours.
Yes.
Right on.
Yes.
And if we're not operating in that lens, then we have a problem.
Yes.
And it goes back to what Barry's saying about, the gatekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
If they're in there saying, oh, well, I made it, and I'm this, that, then no, they're not thinking from a lens of understanding that they are preparing. Their job is to prepare the next generation, because all of our shoulders are going to be stood on, and we need to make sure that our not just our youth, but others, no matter what their age, they are ready to stand on our shoulders.
If we even know them or not.
And understand that that's their role.
Yes.
This can't stop with us, and it can't stop with the generation that's here now. In order for this to work, in order for the system to really change, we have to be instilling this generation after generation until we get what we deserve. And we deserve dignity and respect.
And some people just gotta be knocked out the way. Let's be
Yeah.
honest.
Tell her, Queen, let's be honest.
Nobody
Go on,
said,
let's.
please excuse me, it's our time now. Sometimes you have to be knocked out the way or shamed or whatever. Shame always has its place. I know that can be trauma informed. No, sometimes you gotta go away. And sometimes people have to make you go away.
Yeah.
And
that goes back reminding them, let me remind you of whose shoulders you standing on.
Yeah.
And it just constantly, because I remember, that's so vivid to me. It's in me, in here. I remember that woman to this day.
But see,
And I'll
She
never
knew her
forget that.
survival
But you
depended
knew,
on
yeah.
her survival.
Yeah.
But I think that, Queen, a lot of the times you have to think about it. We're coming from a system that's designed to make us believe we're included. And we're not. And And sometimes some of these folks that have gotten to where they got have gotten there by a system, and it ain't a color person that's moved them. If anything, we watching and paying attention how much color folks that look like us kind of kept us away from opportunities, right? You gotta let's be honest, right? So when we think about that, when we look at this, that's why it's just a big fist fight, right? We are right now debating on important measures and important propositions. We have not come up with a collective thought or idea where, of course, no one is always going to go to the majority and the minority, but at least have a majority saying we're going to vote yes on Measure U. Why? Because if we have a majority saying that, when they try to play tricky games and funny business, like that majority is coming to that council every freaking Tuesday and having meetings and knocking on doors to the point they're like, what y'all want to do? And then at the same time, when they say what y'all want to do, here's the black agenda. Here's our main plat. We don't even have to have y'all do anything but give us those funds. We've got the construction worker. We got the location. We have the dirt from the land. We got everything. And I don't think that we have that because I don't believe that we're prepared to really engage in this voting process in the way that we need to strategically. The Asians, you don't hear about. You hear the Asians crying about the vote?
No, but they got their own stuff.
You know what I'm saying? And that becomes one of the things. We're constantly on this position of begging, however we want to say it, even begging folks to vote, trying to convince black people to vote. It's almost annoying in a way. Because Negro, at the end of the day, propositions and measures, if you look at what it is, I'm looking at the gas tax, and we can talk, I want to also jump into Prop 10. When I'm looking at like at Prop 10, okay, so you are telling me, black man and black woman, I'm not voting. Do you look at the rent here in Sacramento, what's going on right now? Like you're not going to vote, okay? So, so I can't deal with you if you're complaining about rent. So can you kind of, Queen, give us a shape of what this Proposition 10 looks like?
So what Proposition 10 does is it repeals a law that was enacted in 1995 called Costa-Hawkins. And what Costa-Hawkins did was it clamped down, it's a loophole for rent control. So what it does is anything built after the implementation of Costa-Hawkins, so anything built from 1995 to today, even if the city, county, whatever municipality decides on a rent control ordinance, that's not included. And then single family homes are not included. And then there's this thing that apparently Assembly members Costa and Hawkins hated, which is called vacancy control. And so what that means is if I'm in a rent control unit and I move, at the time, part of the measure only allowed the rent to increase so much even during the case of a vacancy. And so with Costa-Hawkins came vacancy decontrol. And so that's why you see, like in San Francisco, rents are like $3,000 a month because it became then incentivized for landlords to push out rent-controlled tenants because they knew as soon as that tenant moved out, they could jack up the rent to market rate. So Costa-Hawkins is all about protecting the realtors. It's all about protecting big landlords. It's all about protecting developers because anything that a developer builds, they already know no matter what, because Costa-Hawkins is in place, no matter what rent control measures put in, they're protected, they're covered. Yeah. And so it's a loophole to rent control. And what a lot of the I'm just going to say the opposition, because I am pro Prop 10 all the way, talk about is how it negatively, how repealing Costa-Hawkins would negatively impact communities of color. Well, I don't know about y'all, but I know people from San Francisco who lived in San Francisco in neighborhoods that look like the people at this table, look like people in this room, but they were rich, thriving, and I don't mean rich meaning dollar amount, I mean rich as in culture and beauty, thriving black communities that those neighborhoods are no longer there because they've been pushed out because of loopholes in rent control. It wasn't rent control, it was the loopholes. I also know people who were able to raise a family and they were able to live in their home for decades and actually raise their family and live a good life because in San Francisco because they had rent control. And so this is all about money.
One of the things I think we do look at is how we educate not just ourselves, but those around us as well. Again, going back to what we've tried to do recently, is hold those meetings where we've talked about Prop 10, conversations there. And it's interesting, at the end of the day, tomorrow to me still should be what do we do next? And how do we get pulled have conversations about that. There are some people who decided that for whatever reason, I'm opposed to Prop 10, I'm opposed to Measure U, for whatever reason they did it. Tomorrow, what are they gonna do to look at the issues that they're talking about? Because for me, it's those people who seem to be lost, and I saw that it said are lost, who have caused us the most damage. Because they will take a position, they will say, I'm about the community, and after it's over, they move out of the way. You don't hear from it again and for another 4 years.
Yeah.
Whatever the election issue is at
Yeah,
that point.
and I think that's what's Measure U. That's why it's like the people that are saying no, they don't care no damn about the black community whatsoever. I wasn't seeing them put billboards when Stephon Clark got killed. They weren't even around. But at the same particular time, I do understand why my brothers and sisters are pushing to say, I don't think Measure U is for us. I'm not the one leading and saying, oh, it's all about Measure U or not. I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. But I do trust the fact that, one, there's some real individuals at the table that's going to really spit some real, and it's not going to be filtered. It's not going to be compromised, right? Because I don't do no cooning. So I already know I'm good. But at the same time, when the games, if it's going to be played, I'm going to pay attention to that, and I will expose it if it's going to go the wrong way. So my thing is, I would rather gamble on that compared to listening to some cats that I have never seen that are baiting the black community, creating that fear tactic. Oh, the future of black people are in jeopardy because of Measure U. No, not necessarily, because guess what? If Measure U doesn't happen, community centers get shut down. Kids get back to where? To the streets. Then what's the alternative to that? Also, we have private, as I like to say it is, private investment before public investment. Okay, so we want some privateers with their private money saying condo here, condo there.
That's what they do.
Public investment says, whoa, no, affordable housing here, affordable housing over there. Without that, we don't have a say-so. So when people are too far to the left or too far to the right, I kind of get afraid of that. Just being very honest, it kind of makes me think, so what's really in it for you? And the fact that there's been so many individuals that have tried to create this idea that, first of all, black people be put into poverty, that at the same time that we Negroes who are supporting Measure U are sellouts. That's the ignorance that we have to display and have to deal with. And I'm not going to sit there and support anybody that wants to put out, oh, y'all are sellouts and stuff like that, when who really is a sellout?
Yeah.
Now, what game are we really playing? And how are you going to really benefit our people moving forward? And have you really been building with our people before this?
Yeah, and it's the same thing on Prop 10, because on Prop 10, just like what you said, they're doing these fear tactics. And it's a lot of money, because you're talking about realtors who have a ton of money, and they're putting that fear, oh, it's going to hurt the black community. It's going to do this, it's going to do that. No, it's not. And then we talk about the middle income. Let's go back to that middle income, average, African American or whatever. Okay, I may be renting to someone soon. I have property.
I've heard people say that.
And I am going to vote yes on Prop 10 because we need to.
Yes.
Because who is it benefiting? Like what you talked about before, that integrity. And we got to be for our community, you know? So you need to just kind of really look at the issue, like you said. How is it affecting our community, not just me?
Right, landlords who share our values, who are actually looking out for their community, they're not going to gouge families. You know, they're going to work with the families. They know that mom who's working 2 jobs to take care of their babies. They understand all that, and they're going to work with them. They also understand, you know, because of the way paychecks are, and because people are living paycheck to paycheck, her check may not come until the 10th of the month, but I know she's good at her rent. I'll work with her.
Yes.
But those big corporate landlords,
No. And you know, and the funny part about it all, I think what Proposition 10, those who oppose it, who wanted to get it, funneled and say, you know what, this is the wrong thing. I think the dumbest tactical move that they did, because they're not thinking in the lens, and that's why I think the Measure U is a different kind of beast. Because now folks are seeing there's a different kind of black people that are coming to the table. It ain't the same acceptable, kumbaya, yes master, okay, just want to be at the table, boss. It's kind of a different kind of lens. You let the NAACP be your spokesperson to the black community. Here is a fact check. They are not as relevant as they used to be. You know what I'm saying? So when I see that, and I look at 800,000 went to you to say no. Oh, I'm saying yes because there got to be something and it's no knock on them, but this is just a changing of the times. If you are consistently making programs, building services, building things that was going to create revenue streams for the black community,
Right.
and standing in a political sense, in a political way where we're educated and we understand you just a part of the bigger problem that we have and a part of some of that old regime that gotta go. And that's why when I saw that, I said, I know where I'm voting. Go ahead, brother.
You know,
They gotta be held accountable.
and the only thing I gotta do, I gotta bow out now, and I only have to bow out because I have some other things that I
Right
gotta
on.
do. But I wanna thank you guys for this conversation
Yes.
again. I'm gonna say, let's talk tomorrow, let's begin the
Yes.
conversation on
Right
what's
on.
next.
Yes.
Let's talk about it in our various neighborhoods, what we're looking at, let's bring those neighborhood leaders together to begin talking about what do we bring down to the city council. The agenda you're talking about, the black agenda that has to be discussed, has to be discussed, starting now.
Yes.
We can't, we can no longer afford to wait.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right,
Alright.
and we have to hold our electeds
About to wrap it up.
we have to hold our electeds accountable. We have to hold the ones who look like us, the ones who don't look like us, accountable. And I am so done with elected officials and politicians with no courage.
Yes.
Ooh.
I can't take it anymore. I know it's not hard to do the right thing. It really isn't. We all have to make those. Every person at this table makes that choice
Yes.
every day. And so, and yeah, there's a lot of things we could be doing right now, but we care enough about our people to make their better choices. And I'm sorry if the people sitting on those dioceses are not making those choices, then it's our job to take them out. I'm
I
sorry.
love it.
Yeah.
Right
I
on.
love it.
What's
I
your
love it.
All
final
right.
thoughts?
The final thought is building the bench.
Mm.
We haven't talked about that. All of us, not just doing what we are doing, but we need to find at least one or two others
I like that.
and start grooming for that 2020. You talked about it, next election. Okay, we need to start now. This is the meeting before the meeting.
Yes.
So in 2 years, we can have folks ready to go. That's the final thought.
And real quick, just before, Brother Roberts, I know you had something on your Facebook. What are the propositions that you feel that black people, the measures that we should, yes, no, what are some of those
I
ones?
really, if you had told me 1 second.
Okay, yeah. I'll talk for a second.
So excuse me, I have a call, there's a situation I'm dealing with,
Okay.
I'm gonna bow out. And thank you very much for allowing me to be here. If there's a way,
Right on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mama Ro, I can get you the
I got you.
information, I will,
Yeah, please.
I'll put it out to you.
Okay, so measure 10, we can go ahead.
Prop 10.
The Prop 10, yes,
Yes,
okay. Measure U,
yes,
okay. What's the gas tax is?
No.
No.
Prop 6, no.
Prop 6.
The repeal of the gas tax, no.
Okay, why no?
Because the reality is that we actually do need the infrastructure. And so what
Well, I don't need no high gas.
true.
See, that's what I'm
But-
saying, yeah,
but-
so what you,
Very.
we was with each other on the first two, now,
Right,
Mhm.
true, but the reason we have high gas is not solely because of this gas tax. But if we had the same measure, the same tax law, cause it's a law now, say 4 years ago, when gas was $2 and some change, back in the good days, that lasted real brief, it's what the money's for. So we have two issues. We have a federal issue, which is why the gas is now $3+ something dollars, because of decisions that the current administration and this Congress are some making and some not making, like not doing their job. They're just not doing their job. And then we have the local issue. And the reality is, what we need to be also doing is while I am saying yes, that we should vote no on Prop 6, then we need to also be fighting for making sure that people are hired in those jobs look
Yes.
like us.
Yes.
And making sure that we are bringing, resources like how to get a state job. Because one of the things that happens is, I remember when I worked for Senator Penn, there was such this convoluted process that people didn't understand. And so one of the things that was like my mission before I left was to make sure that we brought the state come to the communities that look like us. We were at the Pinnell Center and actually taught them how the test works, taught them how to get in. So what we have, it's going back to opening that door.
Yeah.
So yes, we need the infrastructure. It is an economic driver because people pay better wages, so on and so forth. But what we need to do is make sure that people like us have those jobs.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, that's kind of like some of the three of the major, ones to vote for. And Queen, of course, we gotta vote for you, right?
Right, you gotta
So,
vote for me.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
throw your spin before you go tell us why.
All right, so three reasons for my platform. I've said fiscal responsibility, transparency, and then African American youth. I've made those my same three platforms the whole time, doesn't matter who my audience is. It's been consistent. Fiscal responsibility, the district's budget has been rejected twice by the County Office of Education. That is the start of taking away local control from the entire community. We need to maintain that. I'm a licensed certified public accountant, retired chief business officer. I've done budgets before, so I know how to provide proper oversight for those things, okay? I always say that. Transparency. The district, recently in August, it was reported, they had this contract for a tech company, paid out $5.2 million. The money left the building, is how I put it. Didn't get nothing for it. Okay? We need better accountability, better transparency, and then of course what I talked about at the very beginning, African American males, high suspension rates.
Wow.
They're doing that exclusionary discipline for our children.
Yes.
We need our kids in school being taught, not kicked out all the time.
Right.
Those are my three platforms. That's what I am running for. That is what we need. And nobody else, and I want to say this, even though I have those top two with the fiscal and everything else, and I have a fiscal background, but that third one, nobody else is talking about the African American youth.
Man.
Nobody else that I've seen. There is one other candidate, Jody Johnson in Area 6,
Yes.
but none of the other candidates
Shouts
are
out to Big
talking
Jody.
about. Nobody else.
And-
That's because they're not valued.
And they're not valued, and I think that's why we have to value our own vote,
Right
and
on.
we have to come through and show them how we value our own vote as well as our own lives. And thank you guys for coming out, shooting part two.
Thank you.
This was beautiful.
Yes.
This was really good.
Yeah, got some
Yeah,
good
fam.
information.
Yes.
I don't know about that gas tax, Queen. I'm just like, I'm looking at the short term, and I think that's what we do. We look at the short term instead of the long term, and that's what this whole thing is. To be honest, is just the long term game. And I feel like with us, we have to see the value in our vote at a strategic level. And I feel if we do that, then we can now start picking the pieces up and figuring it out. But let's get out of that lens and that idea and that culture of Democrat, Republican. The Democrats don't do nothing for black people just as much as the Republicans don't do nothing for black people. Let's get out of that science.
Yeah.
And let's start really having more of these educated conversations to build what we're supposed to, and that's building black.
Yeah, and I wanted to, just a little thing, Sacramento Sister Circle, I printed it out.
Yes.
If you want more information, Dr. Flo does this whole analysis
Yes.
on everything.
I think we should add that on our comments. Just put that link on for
Okay.
folks. So folks, go out and vote, trap the vote. No, I ain't gonna say woke the vote, wake the vote, but trap the vote. Go trap the vote, get that and do your thing, and we will see you on our third part after.
Yes,
Yeah, the after.
The
All right,
after
y'all.
hour. All right.
thank you.
And our word for the day is lean in.
Hey, yeah, lean it in. Huh? Lean it in. Shout out to Pastor Les.
Yes.
All right.
Let me see. I can't see nothing on this thing. Okay.